2016 was the year to beat the odds. The Cubs won the World Series. Utah nominated the first major party transgender candidate for the U.S. Senate. Hillary Clinton put another crack in the presidential glass ceiling. And Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. Tonight on the Hinckley Report, we wrap up a roller coaster year in politics. Republicans managed to hold on to both the U.S. House and Senate. What policies will they push? What, if anything, will remain of Obama's legacy?
Today, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, 20 million more Americans from every state have the financial security of health insurance.
Across the nation, state houses and governors' mansions are more red than ever. Do majorities equal unity within the GOP? In Utah, how do Democrats counter the Republican supermajority? Trump took Utah, but by the lowest of margins. Why did he have such a difficult time winning this stalwart Republican state? What do changing demographics mean for Utah and the nation? And who can capitalize on them? Meanwhile, Utah's voter turnout remains one of the lowest in the country. What is being done to reverse this trend? Good evening, and welcome to the Hinckley Report. I'm Jason Perry, director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. Covering the week, we have Robert Gerke, political reporter with the Salt Lake Tribune, Julia Ritchie, political reporter with KUER, and Rod Arquette, radio host of the Rod Arquette Show on KNRS. Thank you all for being with us on this wrap-up of an amazing political year.
Understatement.
Yeah, that's for sure. Let's chat about Utah for a moment on this election cycle. Many people calling from around the country about why Utah was relevant at all. We've got 3 million people, we've got 6 electoral votes, yet we were a topic of much conversation. Let's start with you, Rod, for just a moment. Why were we so interesting and relevant on the political stage?
Well, there are a couple of things, I think, Jason. First of all, wasn't it nice to have some attention paid to us finally? I mean, we've been here long enough that we're kind of ignored over the years, but it was nice to get some national attention. And I think the Trump factor, the Evan McMullin factor, all played into this. All of a sudden you have this really red state. Many people consider it the reddest of red, even though I would argue that sometimes. But all of a sudden you have this Republican candidate who is not getting as much traction as past candidates have, and everyone's asking why and what's going on here. A lot of it dealt with character issues, a conservative state. A lot of people here in this state don't think Donald Trump is as conservative as he claims to be. So I think the attention was focused on us for a number of reasons. I think those were the main two.
Very interesting. Now, Julia, you were in Nevada for a lot of this election cycle. Were you watching what was happening here, and what did you think about it?
A little bit, because of the caucuses, and Nevada has a caucus as well, and Bernie Sanders was a major contender during that. And so a lot of people felt that if Bernie Sanders was doing well in western states, as he did, that would mean trouble for Clinton in the general election, because those supporters of Sanders don't necessarily like Clinton. So there were a lot of there was a lot of attention to the West this year as a region.
There really was. Now, Robert, you were following all of it very closely, and we mentioned a couple of these names. It's interesting. We had 2 campaign headquarters here in the state of Utah. We had visits from the candidates.
You had visits from the candidates. You had campaign headquarters, and you have to kind of look back and think from Hillary Clinton's perspective what she was thinking in putting 5 staff in Utah, because it turns out you focus on Utah trying to pull the Hail Mary or shoot the moon, I guess, and you end up neglecting Wisconsin and Nevada and those states that actually ended up making the decision in the election. But at the time, it seemed like those states were solid, and when you looked at the electoral map at the time, the 6 votes that Utah had could potentially have come into play. Obviously, it didn't with Trump breaking the blue wall and winning those Rust Belt states. But at the time, it seemed like it could have mattered. And as Rod mentioned, with Evan McMullin in the race, it was such a strange dynamic, something that we had never seen before here or really nationally in a long time.
So talk about it, because you followed Evan McMullin very closely. The polls were very interesting. What do you make about his impact on the election in the state?
It was astonishing that a guy that really didn't have much money and had zero name recognition got into the race in August, could actually pull off the impact. even if it was just in one state. I mean, it got him some national attention, but Utah was really the only state where he was a major factor. And you know, it showed, I think, more than anything, that people just didn't like Donald Trump and were looking for really any other candidate out there. For a while, Gary Johnson was polling in double digits. Evan McMullin got into the race and immediately shot into double digits. You know, at the end of the day, the Trump voters, you know, the Trump team sent Mike Pence out to Utah toward the end of the campaign, and his message was, it's time for Republicans to come home. And ultimately, that's exactly what they did. They really didn't like Donald Trump, but they really didn't like Hillary Clinton even more.
And I think that was a key factor. I think Pence coming out kind of told conservatives, okay, I'm around him, and I think voters became realists near the end, and initially where McMullin was doing fairly well in the polls, but I think as we got closer and closer to Election Day, I think there were a lot of people out there who were saying, I'd like to vote for the guy, but he really doesn't have a chance. Okay, so we've got to we'll vote for Donald. Hopefully he'll surround himself with people that we'll like, and we can go from there. And someone told me very early on in this campaign, he said, look out for the closet Trump voters. And I think that was a key factor out there. Robert may agree or disagree with me, because I think there were some people who in the office or at parties wouldn't talk about Trump, but they closed that curtain and they said, what the hell? Yeah, let's see what happens. And I think that may have played a role.
I'm kind of inclined to disagree, just because the exit polls showed that about a third of the people, almost 40% of the people who voted for Trump, decided at the very end of the race. These were not people who supported Trump, but they're people who held their nose and ended up voting for him anyway. Because as you mentioned, Evan McMullin really didn't have a chance. And I think especially the potential of Hillary Clinton picking Supreme Court nominees really kind of gave them the jitters, you know.
Do you think that was one of the deciding factors for people in the state of Utah? You would say it was there, Julia?
Yeah, and talking about late breaking, I think it surprised a lot of people that Trump ended up taking something like 80% of the evangelical vote, and that was not expected, and especially in a state like this. There are other religions besides Mormons here too that, you know, they broke late for Trump.
That's for sure. Now, speaking of the relevance of the state and the Supreme Court nominee, we even have Mike Lee, who is no friend of Donald Trump through this election cycle, showing up this week, like many of our other candidates, you know, and former candidates like Mitt Romney. Even we have people making the pilgrimage out there to D.C. to meet with him. What do you make of this? Is this still us being relevant? Why are they still listening to us?
Well, I think both Mike Lee and his brother Tom, Supreme Court Justice Tom Lee, were on Trump's short list as potential Supreme Court nominees during the campaign. He put that out there, I think, largely, as you pointed out, to kind of make the evangelical vote and the conservative voters feel better about themselves, or feel better about Trump, I'm sorry. And so, you know, Mike Lee has a good reputation. He's a conservative senator. There's no question about his credentials, and he helps him in that part of. But as you mentioned, he's really been an outspoken critic. I think at one point, after the tape surfaced about Trump talking about how he treated women, Mike Lee taped a video that he said called him an embarrassment, said he was a distraction and he should drop out of the race. So now if Trump makes him a Supreme Court pick, that would be a pretty shocking turnaround. But you know,
yeah, that's for sure.
He's been Trump has done a lot of pretty shocking turnarounds.
I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what Trump is doing, because you're right. He's brought all these different people into Trump Towers. I mean, from Kanye West to Ray Lewis, the NFL linebacker.
Yeah, we've seen them all.
He's got the high tech giants in there. What is he doing? And will the American people accept that, well, he's trying to reach out to everybody, or are there others saying that's all just for show and he really has his own intentions?
Let's talk about the reach out a little bit, because you all mentioned this, Julia, you did just a moment ago too. This blue wall, the reach out for the Republicans and the Democrats, that's what we're all watching. As Hillary was running her campaign, she said, I've got this firewall, right? I've got this group of people, particularly in the Midwest, that I can count on. Turns out, she couldn't count on them in this particular race. Will you talk about why that's the case?
Well, I think we saw Hillary Clinton performed okay among the groups she was going for, and that's the Latinos and African American votes, but not well enough. And Trump overperformed in a lot of groups. One stat that really surprised people was that Trump ended up taking something like 52% of white women voters. And so that's something that she thought she had on lock was the woman
How
vote.
so?
But women don't vote in a block either, and I think that's something that we'll be parsing out in the months to come.
Well, give us your thoughts. What would make a woman in the Midwest, particularly, even happened here in the state of Utah, not as a block but as an individual, be willing to overlook some of the things that were said and cast the ballot ultimately? What do you think the prime issue was?
My favorite
You
take
and
is
then-
that everything mattered, and so the Comey letter that came out right before the election, it being a change election and people just wanting a different party in the White House, all of those things I think would sway a voter in the final weeks. You know, especially if you were, let's say, more independently minded swing female voter.
Interesting. Rod, you had a
Julia,
comment there.
she may hit me on that. I think women are tougher on women than anything else,
no.
and she would agree. I mean, I think women looked at Hillary. Some women looked at Hillary and said, "I don't like her." And it could be a variety of reasons. It could be the way she wore her hair that day, or it could be some of the things she's saying. That I just don't think Hillary ever connected with a lot of people out there. And I think part of the issue was women are tough on women.
There's
You
also
can-
a big education
the
divide there too.
There's an education divide there, and they're going, I can't do it, because a lot of people thought, and I even said on my radio show early, she's going to get the women vote. Guess what? She didn't get the women
think in the
vote as much
postmortem-
as she thought she would.
Yeah, I was gonna,
that's what she thought.
and on that
Yeah.
point, I think in the postmortem, I think the Clinton campaign took a lot of segments of the population for granted.
Yeah. Good
You
point.
know, white women in particular. I think they expected blacks and Latinos to turn out in bigger numbers than they did, and you know, they've lost the union vote in a lot of parts, especially as we saw again, Michigan, Wisconsin, and parts of you know, other Pennsylvania, other Democratic strongholds. So they've got some real work to do. You know, we saw the electorate in 2012 was completely different than the electorate in 2016, and so where is the Democrats' base now? It's kind of, they've got to figure that out,
Yeah,
because
they've got to find it.
Let's talk about the finding it question, all right? Because for a long time, for many years, we thought we would rely on some of these pollsters to help us find it, find out what people cared about the most, what the issues were more important, and even how they were going to vote. Robert, not many of the pollsters were right about this
They
one.
missed it by a mile, didn't they? Yeah, well, to be fair, the national polls on the popular vote were pretty much spot on, which is interesting, because how do they get that right, and how do they get these states so wrong? I think, as I mentioned, the electorate, they were expecting it to be more like 2012, and it was not like that at all. I mean, it was more like a 2010, 2006 electorate. And so, and we saw this too with the Romney polling 4 years ago. Romney's people legitimately thought they were going to win this election in 2012, because they had a model of the electorate that what they thought was going to be, they thought it was going to be like a 2010 election, and it wasn't. All of the pollsters thought this electorate in 2016 was going to look like 2012, but when you have different candidates on the ballot, a different electorate comes out. And so when you're trying to model it, you try to get your polls to, you predict what the electorate's going to look like and try to sample those people. But they got their prediction wrong on what the electorate's going to look like.
Yeah,
So,
and there are a lot of issues there they've got to deal with. How do we get the cell phone people?
Yes, right, that's a
you know,
big
my
issue.
children, they haven't got a landline, and you know, it's a thing. So how do they reach those people? I always thought it was interesting too. I wondered about the Trump voters. How many of them either lied to the pollsters or just didn't even want to talk to them because they don't trust them?
they don't trust them.
You know, and there's a segment of the voting population out there that I think they missed because either they didn't want to talk to them or they lied to them.
And Nate Silver talked about that. He
Yeah.
runs the 538 blog that
Right.
a lot of people look to for aggregate polling. And he says, you know, when Trump didn't do as well in the debate performances and they called the next day, would they tell the truth and say, you know, we're going to vote for Clinton because she did better in the debate, but really they're still going to vote for Trump.
So in this new age of polling and trying to reach people, whether it's by phone or online, which it seems like people are a little more honest about when you ask the question, what is the right question to ask to really get a flavor of who's going to win this election?
Well, I think that's a very important question that they have to ask going forward. I think for one thing, there was too much polling. I think people were saturated with poll numbers, and I think that probably, again, these people like Rod mentioned who didn't like or didn't trust the pollsters, you see so much polling day after day, and it turns them off. But I also think that one of the things that is most fundamental when you ask polling questions is, who do you typically vote for? The party you identify with typically dictates how you're going to vote, and that's a tough thing to break. And so, you know, who have you voted for in the past is another good question. But again, hitting those cell phone calls is going to be more and more important as we go forward, and trying to get a better idea of what the electorate's actually going to look like.
And this whole issue, and we've seen more and more polling come out on this. The trust factor in this country, no matter what organization you're looking at, is at all-time lows on everything. So I think it's going to be hard for a lot of people out there to even trust polls anymore. Like Robert's saying, there were so many polls out there, we're getting them almost minute by minute, and you're saying, enough of this already. Let's see what happens on November 8th.
Well, the positive thing is, sounds like you're all still going to look at those polls.
We'll still look at it.
Sure.
Yeah, I absolutely do.
Good talk.
That's good. Because I want to talk about the media for just a moment, all right? Because you start talking about how the public feels about everyone. The media hasn't been graded that well, just like the candidates themselves haven't been. But since you all are part of the media, this group that maybe Donald Trump likes to bypass just a tad, let's talk about how this new approach works with you and how you're going to go forward on this thing. We'll start with you, Robert. If he'd rather have a tweet than a press conference, how do you handle that?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be a challenge going forward, because he's already shown that there's a resentment from the president-elect toward the media. He's attacked media outlets he doesn't like, and you know, accused them of lying and so forth. And typically the media has done a pretty good job covering him, frankly. I mean, the stuff that has been reported that rankles the president-elect has been accurate. And so how do you do that? I mean, there was a story during the coverage of the campaign where it's like these reporters there was sort of lie exhaustion or BS exhaustion, where they can report over and over and over again that he's not telling the truth about this issue or that issue, or that he's got this fact wrong or that fact wrong, but people just didn't care. And so that's the bigger problem right now, I think, is especially in this age of social media where you know, we are no longer the gatekeepers. We're not standing there telling people, providing context or telling people what is going on and why it matters. They just go around it, and Trump has been a perfect example of that with his tweets and with his and people don't trust the media, and it's a fundamental problem right now that the media's got to deal with.
More than before, or is it worse than you've experienced?
I think because media has become siloed and fractionalized, and people can go to their own echo chambers and get their own viewpoints sort of reinforced, and because of the internet you can do that very easily now. People aren't going to sort of centralized, trustworthy news sites. That it's a lot easier to go around the media now.
But I find it interesting. An example, you have the story about this Texas electric who wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times saying, here's why he's not voting for Donald Trump, but he's a Republican, here's why. But now you have investigative journalism at a local station down in Texas digging out that this guy is not what he claims to be. He is not a first responder. He does have an EMT license, but he hasn't worked for half the people he claims he's worked for. And now the media does its job. So a lot of people are going, wait a minute, they dug in this story and it's confirming what we're doing. So it's a real interesting situation where the media is. I think on a national level, there's a lot of distrust for the media.
Yeah.
I think locally, though, local media outlets, I still think there's quite a bit of trust in a lot of local media outlets.
We all trust you, of course.
Yeah.
Julie, you also, let's talk about that for just a moment, okay? So for a long time, reporters had a chance to say, this is the story that I'm going to run, this is this person I'm going to go talk to about it, this is what I hope to tease out of it, right? But now, let's just take a local example. Donald Trump says, F-35, Joint Strike Fighter, costing us billions of dollars, it's going to change after I'm put in office. That's directly on us, the state of Utah. But you, as a reporter, a news person, how do you handle something like that when someone else decided
I think there's
the
a
news story?
False dichotomy that we either ignore Trump's tweets or we cover the things that we think are important. It's like he's the president-elect. Like, we have to cover his tweets. And you start with what and also he's a product of New York tabloid culture, so he knows how to grab those headlines. So I don't think it's a matter of, do we just ignore him because he's trying to distract us from some larger scandal, or do we cover the things that we think are important? I think I saw a lot of good reporting coming out of that tweet. People called Orrin Hatch's office. They asked him what he thought, and that's that's how we're going to have to do it. Is we're going to have to pay attention, and then pay attention here locally.
He is such an unconventional type of, I think we can all agree.
polite word.
That's an understatement of the year. I think we're going to have to figure out how to deal with him, because I agree. I mean, in his first book, Art of the Deal, he even says, I throw out, almost like I throw out grenades, and I'm going to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's what we have to do. When he throws out those grenades, how do we deal with it? How do we respond to it? How do we report on it? And it's going to be an interesting 4 years.
Yeah, and that's the part that's kind of concerning, though, too, right? I mean, Rob Bishop said the other day that his big concern isn't what Donald Trump tweets; it's the fact that he is tweeting, which is kind of an interesting point. Because why? It's not just about what we think about Donald Trump's tweets, and it's not just about what American voters think. There's now international implications to him throwing grenades like that, and there's the potential for this to end really badly because of 140-word,
and business implications, because the stock for the company that builds the F-35 took a nosedive that day.
Which is directly impacting our economies.
Directly everybody.
Okay, let's talk about where Republicans, Democrats go from here. When Obama took office, we had 31 Democratic governors in the United States. It's flipped completely to 31 now Republican governors in the states, and 25 states now have a trifecta: Republican governor, Republican House, and Republican Senate. That has changed dramatically. Do you have an idea as to why that has happened, and what do the Democrats need to do?
Well, I think part of it has been that the Democrats have lost some of their union support, some of that base that was the dinner table Democrats from the 60s and 70s, and because frankly the Democratic Party, the National Democratic Party, has paid more attention to sort of the Latinos, black voters, and these other groups that are making up a larger and larger portion of the electorate. But it doesn't do you any good if you start losing the other leg of your stool. And so I think especially in not rural, but in the heartland, right? You see blue on the coasts and you see red in the middle. They're going to have to kind of get back to finding a message that resonates with those voters, because there are basic economic issues that are important to those people in the Midwest and in the central part of the country.
Gerrymandering has been a huge issue as well, and I think that's something that when we see the redistricting process happen, we're going to see people paying a lot more attention.
But the gerrymandering does. I'm certainly not disagreeing with you, but from the standpoint of electing senators and electing governors, it doesn't matter in that regard, and so I think there is cause for Democrats to be concerned.
There's been a lot more money funneled to.
I think the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do. I mean, if you look at everything that you were citing as far as state legislators, you got to get back to the basic, get down to the ground level, and start building. And you've got to find some rock stars out there, and there aren't any. Not many that I see right now, and they've got to find some people. I think there are a few people here in the state, Democrats, who I think a lot of people, even Republicans, even conservatives like myself, say, okay, I can work with that. But I don't know why they're not reluctant to step up to the bigger stage right now.
Well, go ahead, Rob.
The poll the other day said that Democrats want Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders to run in 4 years. If that's the future of your party, a couple 80-year-old
And look at the House leadership. The House leadership, the average age, they're 78 years old on the Democratic side.
Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer are not going to want
not going to cut it for a lot of people.
They're not. That's true. Well, let's talk about these majorities for just a second, if we might. So Utah's had this trifecta since '93. All right, it's been a while for us. Can you just get everything done when you have a majority like that, or is there a problem even in a supermajority like the state of Utah? Robert, you follow this.
Well, things move pretty smooth when you have control of all branches of government. Republican leaders basically make the decisions in terms of the budget and in terms of policy decisions. And every once in a while you have a flare-up where Republican members are split, and you do have factions in the Republican Party. But you can talk about Nevada, the difference that you saw there, where you actually have two distinct, fairly equal parties. It's a totally different dichotomy.
Yeah. And I wish we had it a little bit more, to be real honest. It would make, and I don't know how long it will take the Democratic Party to get there, but I think it is good for the state.
Well, and the state Democrats thought they had a chance of picking up 4 or 5 seats this year, and they ended up only netting one.
You have to look, and Robert touched on this, within the Republican Party are the factions you have to look at, because you have some of the very rock solid conservatives, you have the more moderates, you have the business Republicans. Those are the factions that you have to look at
That's
within
right.
the Republican Party.
And we have emerging new kinds of candidates. Our first transgender candidate in the state of Utah, right? We have a changing demographic in the state of Utah, which is something we have to watch very closely as well. So in our last minute and a half, what's coming for this next year? The big political story, 2017. Robert, what is it?
I think you want to watch these ballot initiatives. I think you're going to see there's already talk about a ballot initiative to raise income taxes to fund education. I think that's going to sort of take shape this next year, and you're also going to probably have a ballot initiative on legalizing medical marijuana, because I think, again, the legislature is probably not going to act on that, and I think the voters, there's some money behind that movement, and I think the voters they're going to take it to the voters. And as far as the national level, I mean, if you can guess what Donald Trump's going to do, I mean, he's less predictable than a squirrel on meth, I think, sometimes.
Wow.
And so you've got to, so that's going to just be a circus to watch.
Okay. Julia, what do you think?
I think states leading the way as far as setting policy is what we're going to see, because we still, again, we don't know what Donald Trump is going to do to rectify sort of the populist bent of his campaign versus the more conservative Congress that he has to deal with. And I think redistricting, again, Obama, when he leaves office, is going to start an initiative with Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, to work on redistricting more fairly. That would help the Democrats and lower races.
Okay. Rod.
Boys and girls, keep your arms and legs in at all times, because I think it's going to be a heck of a ride. And he is under a lot of pressure, I'm talking on the national level, to get things done. How much can he change Washington, or will Washington change him at all? And his base, can he hang on to that base? And if he doesn't deliver on everything, even if he just delivers on a few items, they'll hang with him.
Well, and we mentioned the change. Barack Obama came in as a change candidate and got just stymied by the intransigence in Washington.
That is so true. Very insightful. Thank you for your comments on these very important issues. That's it for the Hinckley Report. For more political analysis and the news of the week, please check out our Hinckley Report Web Extra online. On behalf of the Hinckley Institute of Politics and KUED, I'd like to wish you a happy and safe holiday season. Thank you and good night.